All right, all right. Welcome everybody. Halftime Thursday night football. Chiefs Broncos Giants live Q&A. Pat Leonard from the Daily News here, Talking Ball podcast on the Believe Network. Subscribe, hit the like button, hit the thumbs up. You can do the super chats and super stickers. That means you can pay to have your comment in this chat, your question answered immediately. It gets elevated to the top. We get right into it. Use that feature. It is fantastic. I see a ton of questions in the queue already. Welcome, everybody. Before I get to your questions, just want to tell you quickly about Bet Online. Football is back. Bet Online is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info with all the up-to-the-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with Bet Online's real-time updates or statistics, news, and odds from week one all the way to the college football playoff and Super Bowl. BetOnline gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And where I'm starting, everybody, is with John Mara and Steve Tisch. I wrote for the New York Daily News that will publish on Friday in the newspaper on newsstands everywhere around the city and the New Jersey area that it's time to hear from ownership. And I know it's early. I know it's only 1-4. I know it's only going into week 6. But to me, we are at a juncture, at a crossroads here for the Giants, where when you consider their recent history, they've had 3 head coaches fired either during or right after their second season coaching the team: Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, and Joe Judge. Now, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll exceeded expectations in year 1, 9-7-1. They win a playoff game in Minnesota. Everybody's feeling good about it, and everybody knew that it was supposed to be a 3-year rebuild. But that's what was supposed to happen with Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge. They had a promising first year, only 6-10, almost win a weak division, but then the wheels fall off in year 2, obviously aided by, of all things, a Daniel Jones neck injury that knocks him out for the final 6 games of that season. Daniel Jones not worried that this is long-term this year, says it's a different injury. But now, again, it's a little eerie. You have Daniel Jones out. Giants going to Buffalo. Tyrod Taylor expected to start. The Giants 2-touchdown underdogs against a team that leads the NFL in sacks with 21, the Buffalo Bills. Leonard Floyd, a guy who has constantly been entertained by the Giants in free agency, and even in the draft, they wanted him but haven't been able to get. And Von Miller, obviously, the star pass rusher for the Bills on the other side. It's going to be tough for that offensive line to handle. But bottom line is this: Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, while they're supposed to be given a long rope, and listen, anyone who gets hired to do a rebuild should be given a long rope. But, if you're going to handle each regime this way, the way you did Gettleman Judge, the way you did Ben McAdoo coming off a playoff appearance, the way you did Pat Shurmur after 2 years, then it's fair to ask where ownership stands now, right now. Now, maybe there's a difference between being 1-4 and 1-7, right? Who knows whether 1 month will change all of that drastically, right? And we haven't heard from Steve Tisch in a long time. We haven't heard from John Mara on the record in a while. So who knows when the next time will be. But the bottom line is this: this GM and coach are 4-10-1 in their last 15 games. They are 1-6-1 in the NFC East. The Giants are a -91 point differential, the worst in the NFL, worse than even the Patriots. And anyone who's watched the Patriots knows how bad Mac Jones, that offense, and Bill Belichick's team are right now, how hopeless it looks up there in Foxborough. But where the Giants stand, the fact that they now have a lot of Joe Schoen players in the building, the fact that a lot of the offensive linemen who are letting the team down and put in positions not to succeed are Joe Schoen offensive linemen. Mark Lewinsky, one of his big signings. Tyrod Taylor is one of his big signings, who's going to be playing in Buffalo on Sunday night on NBC. I will be there to bring you live coverage, not only on Twitter and on the Daily News website, but also right here on YouTube at PL on NFL on this page. If you don't subscribe already, remember, guys, we do the midweek chat at Thursday Night Football halftime. We also do the post-game live chat after we come out of the locker room, talking to Brian Daboll, talking to the players. I file my stories for the Daily News, and then I jump right on with you guys and bring you everything that I have from the locker room. That's injury updates, that's analysis, that's all of it. So let's get to your questions. I see a ton of them in the queue here. Before I get to your questions, I'm going to take a sip of my Screwball whiskey. That's right, the peanut butter whiskey. We're going to get them on as an official sponsor, I'm telling you. But I'm going to keep drinking it anyway. It is delicious. Can't recommend it enough. All right, delicious. All right, Rick Bowman is here. Rick is back. Cheers. Hey, Rick, how you doing? Pat, do you have any reporting to suggest the 100th anniversary of the franchise in 2025 is a factor in front office decision making? How important is that year to John Mara? That's an interesting question, Rick. Uh, I do know that the Giants, listen, if anything circled on their calendar, it is that. I think you can expect, um, a lot of fanfare, a lot of special things being, brought out by the organization. They definitely want to put their best foot forward, and you would think, be turned around by that point as an organization. What you bring up is an interesting argument in terms of retaining Joe Shane, Brian Dable, even if you tear it down, trade some pieces, and rebuild this year, because you do want to get that continuity, keep it together, and you want to ride into that 100th anniversary, into that year, but really just into the future with a foundation, right? That's what Steve Tisch said in his statement after the Minnesota win. It was actually a pretty measured statement coming off a win. It was almost like sounded like they lost when you read Tisch's statement, but essentially he said Joe Shane and Brian Dable had built a strong foundation, but they had a lot of work to do and everybody knew it. And so, I think the Giants are at a crossroads here because if they listen, John Mara doesn't want to talk about tanking. He doesn't want to hear the word tanking. He will never tank. And he doesn't even want to discuss the appearance of his Giants possibly making a single decision that has to do with improving their draft pick rather than winning a game. You remember the Chase Young Bowl, right? Them winning the Chase Young Bowl, and then Washington loses, gets a higher draft pick. They get Chase Young, who was supposed to be the grand prize. The Giants end up getting who? Andrew Thomas, right? And though he's hurt right now, Andrew Thomas turned out to be an excellent player and a guy who hopefully can stay healthy and then fulfill that big contract he just signed with the Giants. But they're just case in point of the fact that the Giants aren't going to tank. They're not going to lose games, even if it means getting the second pick over the third or the third over the fourth, whatever the case may be. But why that's interesting, if John Mara and Steve Tisch look at this season, let's say they lose to Buffalo and then they lose to Washington. What do you do? Do you sell Saquon Barkley? Do you trade Xavier McKinney? Do you trade Leonard Williams? Do you trade Adoree Jackson? Right. These are all players who, for one reason or another, either on a final year of a contract or they're on an expensive contract that you want to get out from under, whatever it is, or it's a player that maybe you're not going to pay, who's seeking a deal that he's going to get elsewhere, whatever the reason. But if it comes to that, is that what John Mara is comfortable with? Is that what Steve Tisch is comfortable with? Because if you trade Saquon Barkley in the middle of this year, you're sending the message to your team what you think of them and what you think of this season. And that's just not like John Mara or Steve Tisch or the Giants. Like it's just not what that's not what they do usually, right? I mean, they did trade what was this, the 2000s, was it 2017 when they traded Damon Harrison, Eli Apple at the deadline, that kind of thing. And to be fair, that team was kind of already on its way out, right? Um, so there's different scenarios to look at. There's different precedents to look at when you talk about how are the Giants going to proceed. But to answer your question, Rick, when it comes to the 100th year anniversary and 2025, that is definitely something the Giants want to be in good standing for. And, um, you know, this is why it all ties into, for me, the decision of what to do with this GM and coach, depending on how this year goes, because you could make the argument based on what you're asking. Just take a deep breath. Don't blow it up after one bad year. Stay patient. Remember that blowing everybody out of the building and bringing in an entire new group isn't the way to fix it, because that's what you keep doing and it's not working, right? I think when you bring up that season and we talk about trying to create some continuity and lay a foundation, that maybe makes the argument for keeping it intact. That said, if you don't draft good players and your signings don't work out, and your team doesn't improve and it actually gets worse, that's the counter argument. I hope that answers that question, but I think it's interesting you have that on the mind, because that is something that people in the organization are they value, they're already talking about. There's already things in the works for. And I think, Giants fans, hopefully your team is winning at that point. It'll be a really exciting year. Wow, look at this queue of questions. Holy cow, you guys are crushing it. Hit the like button, hit those thumbs up. That helps us. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already once we are done here. And if you miss any of this live chat, you can go to our audio podcast on Apple, Spotify. We will have this published probably Friday morning, and you can listen to everything we have discussed. All right, let me speed it up here. Make sure I get to your questions. Remember, if you're waiting on a question or you want your question answered immediately or you just want to support the podcast, you can pay for a super chat or a super sticker, have it elevated to the top. I'll answer it right away. Last chat, we had a guy pay $10 to ask right up top about Saquon Barkley and whether the team should talk about trading him and what they would get in return and that kind of thing. All right. So, Rick, thanks for kicking us off. Jake Patterson, what's up, Jake? Welcome back. Jake says, could some of Neal's play be due to the lack of trust in the right guard? Seems like if he was with a more competent guard, he would have trust on the inside shoulder. Jake, I would say it's true that he doesn't have any help coming from that side when you talk about Marcus McKeithen being there, Jalen Mayfield, who just gets thrown into the fire. There really hasn't been any consistency, continuity, even going back to the training camp rotation of Mark Lewinsky, Ben Bredesen, Josh Azudu. It was just like a one different player after another. I know they were trying to let everybody compete and win a job, and really they wanted Azudu to go and take it, but he couldn't. But it prevented continuity from developing on the line. So I don't think there's nothing to that. But I think my answer to your question would be that Evan Neal is accountable for his own play. And I think he even said basically when he lashed out about how frustrated he was based on all the criticism he was getting and all that. One thing he did say was that he's frustrated with his own play and he just hasn't played well enough. There's no sugarcoating it. And, Joe Shane drafted Kayvon Thibodeau 5th overall, Evan Neal 7th overall. Kayvon has come on here and I think proves that when the lights are on, that motor gets going and you see some plays made in big spots. It still needs to be more. His run defense has to be better. But Evan Neal, he's got to turn it around. And we've seen with Andrew Thomas, it can happen. There are people who believe Evan Neal is not in the right position, but he needs to get it going. There's no excuse. He hasn't played well enough to go along with 1,000 other guys on the team, especially on the offense. Let's see. Rick also says, what do your non-Giant sources tell you about the job Bobby Johnson is doing? Well, I would just say this. I mean, coaching is a part of it. Head coach is a part of it. Position coach is a part of it. The player personnel selections are a part of it. Ben Bredesen having to play center, he's better at guard. Josh Azudu playing tackle when he was drafted to be a guard and couldn't win a job at guard. Marcus McKeithen playing guard, starting at guard, even though he hasn't proven he's good enough to do so. I look at a lot of these decisions or guys who are struggling in situations, and are they coaching or is it, a guy being put in the wrong spot, being put in a position he hasn't earned yet because he's a draft pick you're looking to develop? I mean, not that Bobby has nothing to do with it. The fact that Evan Neal, to answer your question, the fact that Evan Neal had to go see a specialist and a former offensive lineman and find somebody outside the building to help him set as a right tackle and feel comfortable in his set as a right tackle, that's concerning. I mean, if you don't think that's concerning about what kind of coaching or teaching he's getting, then you're crazy because that's not a good sign. And that's not me talking as an outsider or being overly critical. I mean, that's just what people look and see with their own eyes. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that. So that would be my most critical comment there.